As you can see, both of these gentlemen have earned fellowship here with our academy. We're very proud of that. They're also board certified in integrative biological dental medicine, and they are board certified naturopathic physicians. Ooh, hey. I'm sure you'll enjoy yourself. And who's going first? Give us up to Bill. Sure.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all being here. This is our biggest meeting ever, so we're really excited about that. We've got almost 800 members now, which is quite a bit more than when I started back in, 18 years ago or so. Back in those days, I went to a meeting in Durham. I live in North Carolina, practice in a little town called Yadkinville, which is outside of Winston-Salem. But at the time, I went to Duke on the urging of a friend of mine who was also a dentist, and I walked into this meeting, and it was the wackiest bunch of dentists I'd ever met. These guys had Birkenstocks, ponytails, and they talked about the dangers of fluoride and mercury, which were extremely bad news to me because I use fluoride and mercury. And sat there most of the meeting disagreeing with them. And just a very odd meeting. Nobody showed any teeth. The only dental meeting I've ever been to, no slides of teeth. Now, I'm all through Pankey, Dawson, and LVI and all that stuff, and every dental meeting you go to, you look at pictures of teeth, and we didn't have any. So I thought that was a really strange group. But since that time, I became a member, and then I became a mentor chairman, and then I became involved in the presidential selection. I'm past president, and we'll choose a new one tomorrow. And I was asked to do this with Joe about 4 years ago, so we've been presenting the fundamentals of biologic dentistry for about 4 years. We're trying to figure out how long it's been, but we're guessing that's what it is. Everybody have an easy time getting here last night? Yeah, I worked till 3. I live in North Carolina, 4.5-hour flight. I got stuck in traffic going to Charlotte. Got there in about an hour, so I didn't get to park in the regular lot. I get to park in the valet lot, so I'll take a loan out when I go home to get my car. And almost left my wallet in the car as the guy was driving my car off. He was sitting on the seat next to me, and I thought that's the end of the bad news. Wound up sitting in the window seat, which my wife always gets me because I like the window, but she's usually sitting next to me and didn't come this time. 2 older people slept the entire 4 hours next to me, making it very difficult to get out and even stretch my legs. So I kept thinking, when is this plane going to land? It's lost. We did land, got down to get my luggage, down to the 15th carousel, which is the opposite end of the room. Only to be called William Virtue, come to the American luggage thing, which luckily was right there. Went over there and they said, "You left your computer on the plane." Oh, great. So I said, "Well, can they bring it to me?" He said, "No." So I got to go back through security, get back on the train, go to D9, wait for a half hour till the gate agent came in and got my computer. So I got here late last night. Joe called me and said, "Join us for dinner." And I said, "I am going to the hotel. I'm getting room service, and I'm getting a shower, and I'm going to bed." So that's what I did. So I'm glad you're all here. You're going to have a great 3 days. I hope the half day has been good already. The 2 next days coming up are even better. In this session, you can ask questions anytime you want to. Joe and I usually start in the morning, so we do this stuff to introduce you to the day. The next 2 days, we'll have a section after the meeting, like at 5:30. Everybody will be up on stage. You can ask them questions. So we don't like to interrupt the symposium. Today, you can interrupt us with questions. Just trying to go over any background that might be interesting you. Our goal, and I'll be quite honest and frank with you, our goal is to get you to join the Academy. We're very proud of what we do. This is a unique organization of what Phil mentioned earlier, some loving, caring dentists who we really have a family here. My wife is not here because we have some family in Vegas who went to my house in Virginia. We got a lake house to be with us. So they're in Virginia. I'm here, so my wife's back in Virginia entertaining them while I'm out in their hometown. So that's why she's not here, but she really missed being here. And we hope to change your life. We hope to change your patient's life, your practice life, your staff's life. We have, and I wouldn't be here if I didn't wholeheartedly believe in what we're doing. So, as I did 15, 18 years ago, I sat here with great deal of skepticism about what we're hearing, thinking, "Oh my God, that can't be true," because my dental school didn't teach me this. So we're not here to make anybody wrong. We're just here to present new information, and what we do have is science. The ADA disagrees with us. Your dental school, my dental school, Indiana, disagrees with us. So we went up there to try to say, maybe because you're a public institution, you might want to be a little concerned about this, and we have ways to help you. Well, they sat there and they watched the slide presentation, all the information we had. They were very, very courteous, because I guess we're alumni and we're donating money, but ultimately nothing changed. So, you know, that's the way it is. So we as an academy have decided to kind of go from the environmental issue of this thing, and you'll see later why we would decide to do that. So anyway, enough of that. What we're going to go through with my program is Mercury 101, 102, and Joe will come up and present a little more information to you. This, by the way, the board certified integrative biologic dental medicine and board certified naturopathic physician came from Phil Malika's course, which is all part of an extension of the academy. Joe and I went up there and, Joe, 4 or 5 years ago? It's been a while. Had a ball. Had a great time. I mean, so much information, you just can't digest it all. It's like 9 in the morning to 9 at night for Friday, Saturday, and then you get out about noon on Sunday. But great course. Highly recommend it. So if Phil, I don't know if Phil talked to you or not. I had to skip out for his meeting, but it really is a good one. So I'm going to talk about Mercury 101. Not too boring chemistry. I'm chemistry major physics, and I forget half the stuff I ever learned about it. And Joe will talk a little bit about mercury safe dentistry. I'll come back and talk about communications in a biological dental office. And then a little bit of call to action. You know, like I said, I'm going to be up front. We want you guys to be members. We want you to be academy. We want you to be fellowed and hopefully mastered in the academy. The information you hear at our meeting is derived from science, delivered by clinicians, myself, Joe, everybody here, research scientists and health professionals that are committed to improving and making healthcare safer for patients and the environment. So the next 2 days, you're going to hear from people maybe all over the world, PhDs, research scientists, some dentists maybe, could be a whole smattering of people, but it's just not, well, sometimes they're dentists, but not usually. Usually it's science-based folks. And something Carl Sagan said I think is important because so many of us are maybe not quite sure that we're on the right track here, or you're a little bit doubting of what we might present. But he said the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, meaning that just because you don't have all the facts doesn't mean that you can't make a connection between, say, as an example, MS and heavy metals, being arsenic, lead, you name it, mercury, perhaps one of them. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Wayne Dyer, unfortunately, just passed away a day or two ago, but interesting guy. So that's what we're asking you to do, change the way you look at it. And maybe all of you are looking at it like we do, I don't know, but usually that's not the case. And Will Rogers, if it's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble, it's what you know for sure that ain't so, which is so much often true. All right. I think I hit the wrong button. Promote, I do that a lot. I apologize in advance. An attitude of we are right and you're wrong stops communication. Years and years and years ago, the Academy, when I first went to the meeting, had the impression that, you know, we held the knowledge and all the other dental schools are nuts and crazy and the ADA doesn't know what they're talking about. Well, I still kind of believe that to some extent, but that's not how you communicate with people. So we're not here to make anybody wrong about what we know, what we think we know, or what we believe in, but it's just an open-aired communication, and again, questions are welcomed. We feel the key to changing the current mercury policy is communicating the health and environmental dangers of mercury to the public. That second word there, I know there's a laser here. All right, well, a little bit of my story. Years ago, 18 years ago or so, about the time I was introduced to the toxic effects of mercury, I had an Aunt Vi. My whole family grew up in South Jersey. I was born in Camden, New Jersey, grew up in a little town called Woodbury. My dad was a steam turbine engineer, so we moved around a lot, wound up going to IU because he got moved a lot, but I have family back in Jersey. And as my Aunt Vi, my mother's youngest sister, was dying of Lou Gehrig's disease, when she came down to visit, lovely lady, laughed all the time. I mean, even with Lou Gehrig's, this lady was full of life and joy and love. I noticed her all back teeth were black. You know, they had mercury fillings in all of them. At the time, they were amalgam fillings. But as she progressed in her disease, my mother said to me, Billy, she said, I think your grandmother, my mom's mom and my Aunt Vi's mom, I think your grandmother died of Lou Gehrig's and not MS. I never met my grandmother. She died before I was born. But at the time, we all thought she died of MS. Well, 65 years ago or so, probably the diagnosing wasn't so good. Since then, or after that, 3 of her children, my advised children, have died of Lou Gehrig's. So I got 5 people in my family who died of Lou Gehrig's. So it was either change the way I do it or change what I'm doing. And I like dentistry. It's a great way to make a living, great way to help people. So that's when I made the switch to figure out how to do dentistry more safely. So you can imagine I'm pretty committed to that. As I told you a little bit earlier about my IAOMT introduction, I called them the kooks and the crazies too. Now they're family. And my evolution, I mentioned that earlier. I started out just as a member, going to 1 meeting a year. We'll talk about some of that later, how to accumulate the knowledge and the equipment and what to do. But and then I was asked to be a mentor chairman, and worked for that for a while. Then I was asked to be the assistant. I forgot the ranks, but there's 3 years before you become president. Went through president. There'll be 3 years, I think, this year since I've been president, and then asked to be doing this. So my evolution in this academy has been a lot of fun and very enjoyable.
Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Is mercury toxic?
Elemental mercury is toxic.
Silver amalgam fillings, does it contain mercury?
It does.
Almost up to 50%?
Yes?
Mercury is a toxic substance.
A lot of us have dental amalgams that contain mercury. Anywhere from 4 to 19 micrograms of mercury per day can leach out of your amalgams into your body.
A single filling delivers micrograms of mercury, which in mercury terms is a lot.
Mercury is vaporizing from the amalgams, and you have 80% absorption through the lungs. This is a fairly dangerous scenario.
When dentists go to dental school, they're taught that mixed dental amalgam is completely inert.
They taught us nothing about protecting the staff from the dangers of mercury vapor.
The amount of mercury vapor that's released from amalgam restorations is so minute.
And so when a dentist goes in to grind out an amalgam filling, he is creating tremendous quantities of mercury particulate.
Their dental drill runs at about 400,000 RPM, and it sends a shower of micron size and submicron size particles everywhere. It's tens of thousands of parts per million.
I've never seen levels of mercury this high. That's pretty much unheard of in any type of work environment.
When a woman is pregnant, we hope that she's never exposed to mercury vapor because we know that it can pass the placenta and cause neurological problems in the unborn baby.
Everyone working around hazardous chemicals and other toxic substances has a right to know of possible dangers and how to protect themselves.
When patients see us dressed like this, there's no way they could believe mercury is safe in their mouths.
If you're exposed to mercury, we start seeing much more serious health effects. These health effects would be
Chronic fatigue, double vision,
Couldn't sleep, depression,
panic attacks,
Memory loss.
a lowered immune system,
loss of vision,
chronic headaches.
It's both an immediate problem in some individuals and a very long-term problem in others.
I started having neurological symptoms.
I didn't feel like a human being.
In the deepest part of myself, I thought I was dying.
People think you're crazy, and you're not crazy. You have mercury poisoning.
They'll evacuate a public building for a broken thermometer, but each one of your amalgam fillings has about the same amount of mercury.
2 schools will be closed tomorrow after a custodian finds a small amount of mercury on the floor of a room at Hickman Mills High School.
Now, how much mercury are we talking about? Not very much. About the amount the size of the eraser on this pencil. But school officials explained to us it would only take the amount of mercury about the size of the sharpened end of this pencil to contaminate the entire building.
The toxin that can do the effect, you have it placed within inches of your brain.
They've never done any safety studies on this product.
Why is it that the ADA will not tell the public that mercury amalgam is harmful?
Frankly, the American Dental Association welcomes new looks at all of the dental restorative materials.
The American people are being overtly lied to by the American Dental Association and the dental branch of the Food and Drug Administration.
That's sobering. it's amazing how many of those people that you saw up on that are in this academy are here because they were mercury poisoned and are now well. So a lot of those folks are actual dentists who went through this. So some of them are lay people, but it's an amazing amount of information there. And Randall Moore did that film for us. And I think tomorrow night at the cocktail party, that film's going to be shown. You put what in my mouth? Incredible. You got to check this out. Really something else. All right. So we're going to start out with the history of amalgam. Mercury 101 and 102. Mercury safe hygiene, occupational and patient safety. Strategies for the biological dentist and legal considerations. There's a lot of stuff to, and of course we'll talk about, talking to some ladies at the at lunch today interested in the mentor program, so we'll bring that up too. A lot of us, I'll talk about it later, but what is a biological dentist? A dentist that utilizes the latest technology and techniques to protect his patient's team and the doctor from hazardous dental materials. Years ago there wasn't any hazardous dental materials, but even in 1979 when I graduated in dental school, of course without an assistant we took a lot of these things out dry because you didn't have anybody to suck for you. But when I walked into that clinic, Indiana has a big school. I mean, I bet there's 60 chairs in the operatory clinic and nobody with any mercury protection. I walked into that clinic, it's like, I got to get out of here. We also took a very sophisticated mercury analyzer that we were hoping to set up in the clinic to give the dean an idea how much mercury was present in the air. They weren't interested in seeing those results, so we didn't get a chance to hook it up. But we also, as I'm going to say, we had to put the mercury in a little jar with oil. I mean, that was the thing. You took the scrap, put it in there, and then you shut the lid real quick. Well, you didn't care about what you just stuck in the patient's mouth. A dentist that realizes that materials that are used in dentistry affect biological systems. And a dentist that realizes poor oral health has systemic health connections. Phil talked about that this morning. History of mercury fillings. Mercury containing silver paste. The Chinese in the 7th century dissolved copper, tin, and silver shavings with mercury and formed a paste. They didn't know what to do with it, but it was interested that amalgamation or amalgam formed a paste and set hard. In 1816, Auguste Travaux created the first amalgam filling by combining elemental mercury with shavings from silver coins. Now, what I've always liked to comment about that, you know, we don't always realize why half dollars and quarters have those little ridges on the outside. You know, there's all kinds of little. Well, that's so that if you used to be they were made of silver. Well, you take those and you shave that off. You just keep shaving the outside of a quarter. Pretty soon it got smaller and smaller. So if you got a quarter with all those little ridges cut off, you know somebody's been shaving on it. That reminds me, I just bought bags of junk silver. Has anybody done that? Yeah, half dollars. It's amazing. Look through some of them, 1928, 1918, half dollars. Interesting. I'm just pushing the forward button. It won't go back. Push what? Play? Well, I'm just pushing the button. I push play. Let me see if I can. It won't go forward, man. Why don't you stand up here? Stand right here. Stand right here. Assist me. What are you going to do? I hit that. I hit that. Up and down? Yeah. Then I'll lose my pointer. All right. All right. So Auguste Travaux came in and created the first amalgam fillings by combining elemental mercury and shavings from silver coins. In 1830, whoops, excuse me. Oh, well. I got a new button to figure out. There. In 1833, the Krakow brothers came from France to New York, or excuse me, well, they were French. They came from Great Britain to New York and brought amalgam to the United States. And they kind of set up a clinic, like a commercial endeavor, where they were putting mercury fillings in people's teeth and making some money because they're pretty cheap. You got to imagine back there. In that time and era, I mean, in 1833, it's either extract or some kind of crude drill to drill it out and push some mercury in their fillings, or get a gold crown, I guess. I don't know how effective they were, but Again, I don't know much about ancient dentistry. And that started the first amalgam war. Actually, guys, there was barber dentist and there was physician dentist. And what the barber dentist did was they'd go and get a haircut, and they were the only ones that had chairs that reclined, so it was pretty easy to work on a tooth. And they could extract it, you could do a filling or whatever you wanted to. But at the time, there was another group of people. I'm going to go forward on this just to, oh, thanks. The American Society of Dental Surgeons were also a group of dentists trying to more or less qualify dentists to have a standard of care, and they set up the Baltimore College of Dental Surgery. And what they were trying to do was keep these guys, the barber dentist, from taking over the market. And it was kind of an economic commercial problem. But at the same time, people were becoming aware of what was known as Mad Hatter's disease, which these people would, in the felt industry, would stand over barrels of wool and I think mercury chloride and heat this stuff and stir it to make felt, because felt hats and felt shoes were pretty popular back in those days. Consequently, these people became crazy, and they were crazy as mad as a hatter. That's where that came from. But ultimately, the American Society of Dental Surgeons, after requiring a pledge to use amalgam, began to lose dentists because I guess economics showed that you could make more money doing mercury fillings. So the barber dentist, the dentist who decided to use mercury, formed the ADA in 1859. And there was a word that was called, now we're called quacks for not using mercury, but at the time, dentists who used mercury were called quacks because they used quack, which quicksilver is German for mercury. So using mercury, they were called quacks. But then the second amalgam war started, and this is back in the early 1900s, 1926, and these guys experimented on them. Some of them experimented on animals, some of them experimented on themselves. Berinsky, for instance, he would take the mercury himself and then measure his urine and fecal matter and see which mercury is coming out of that. These guys would measure the disease, bless you, that was caused by different incremental increases in mercury. And again, back in 1931, 1926, these pretty crude measurements, I would think, by today's standards. And the controversy lasted until 1939 when the World War II broke out, and people in Europe had something else to worry about rather than mercury fillings. So that ended the Second World War, amalgam war. And then Hal Huggins, rest his soul, died 4 or 5 months ago. Reintroduced concerns about mercury toxicity, and unfortunately lost his license. I think they got him for practicing medicine without a license because he was concerned with the whole body. He was concerned with the effects mercury would have on MS and different diseases. And having been out to Colorado Springs with him, studying under him, it was very interesting what Hal Huggins brought to the scientific community and what he brought to us. He was one of our original members, but he was with us in Austin a year ago, and it was great to see him before he died. Then the IAOMT was founded in 1985 with the goal of producing science to convince dentists to eliminate mercury, and we still have several of our original members will be here with us this weekend. And the controversy continues. I mean, we're still arguing about it. What is an amalgam filling? Well, if you remember dental school days, which I remember some of it, I was in a fog of mercury, about 50% mercury, 35% silver, tin's about 9%, and copper 6%, and copper's added when it is the high copper alloys release about 50% more mercury than the old low copper alloys. And traces zinc to, I guess, control expansion. I think that's what called creep, wasn't it? Didn't creep expansion? Yeah. It's been 36 years since I finished dental school. When combining chemistry and FDA tells us when combining many components, the compound should be named based on the largest ingredient. Okay, so if it's 50% mercury, it's a mercury filling. And I went to the state board several years ago. I had a problem. One of my colleagues reported me for, I said, excellent service with caring hands or something like that. But it was a superlative in my advertising. And they called me down there and said, you can't say excellent. You can say good or okay, but you can't say excellent. That's fine. I can take excellent out. And then they said, oh, by the way, you're calling these mercury fillings. We want to call you amalgam fillings. Nah. Well, then they went through all my website, they went through all this stuff, and they pulled up all kinds of stuff they wanted me to take off. Well, you know, after paying attorneys to go down here and stand in front of the state board. And a really interesting thing, it's like me talking down to you, only there's like 7 of them up here, and you're sitting down there in a little chair, and they're just kind of peeling down at you. But that wasn't a terrible experience, but it was an experience, but it was costly as far as attorney fees. But ultimately it came out saying, I will call Mercury Fillings, period. I'll take off excellence and all those other superlative words in North Carolina. Can't say that. We got a very, very stringent board and rules, but they allowed me to do that, and that's fine. So, and then every page of my website I had to put on general dentist somewhere. I don't know, it's just crazy, but that's not a problem. I can put that on there. The benefits of Mercury Fillings, I guess a benefit's used for over 180 years. I don't know if that's a benefit or just a fact. They are inexpensive, that's for sure. Silver is really low right now. That's why I bought all those $half. Relatively easy to use, not relatively, real easy to use. Resist chewing forces, yeah, it's harder than the tooth. It sure resists chewing forces. Fundamentals of mercury, it's a heavy metal. Atomic number's 80, atomic weight's 200. That doesn't really that important to us, but that's the fact. And the only thing I know of that's a liquid metal that's liquid at room temperature. How many of us remember playing with mercury as a kid? Breaking a thermometer and watch it scoot across the basement floor. You know, rubbing pennies with them and turn them silver, and just watching this stuff flow around. It was a lot of fun. And we were standing in that room. I don't know what happened to it. You know, the funny thing, if you break a mercury thermometer and you just let that mercury sit there and puddle, come by tomorrow, it's not there. What happened to it? Evaporates. Interesting metal. It's a gas, vapor, colorless, odorless, tasteless. Vaporizes at 10 degrees Fahrenheit. The vaporization doubles every 50 degrees. So if you go from, say, 10 to the body temperature of 100, vaporization pressure would double. Very reactive, oxidizes very, very easily. And then there's some forms of mercury. Mercury, elemental mercury, metal is either liquid or vapor, depending on the situation, but 80% uptake in the lungs, 80% of what's coming off mercury fillings, inhaled, is absorbed into the body. Now that also means you exhale it, because you don't inhale everything. Whatever you don't goes out into your family. The lungs crosses the blood-brain barrier, moderate uptake in the intestines, and it's neutral, has no charge. Mercurous mercury has a charge of +1, has 79 electrons. And then mercuric is +2, it's lost 2 electrons. Inorganic mercury salt formed by oxidation of mercury, poor uptake in the intestines, is not readily absorbed. Poor mobility, does not cross blood-brain barrier, and causes inflammation in the gut, which Phil was talking about today. If you have mercury in the gut, you have a lot of yeast, and you have bacteria that are resistant to mercury and antibiotics. Not good. And with dentists who have practicing, even dentists that practice controls, have probably a lot more mercury in their bodies than the normal population. Methylmercury, mercury formed by bacterial synthesis in the mouth and gut, 95% uptake in the intestines, good mobility across the blood-brain barrier. And then ethyl mercury, thimerosal, which is the preservative in the vaccines that we've been arguing about for years and years and years, that the AMA came out and said, there's nothing to it, don't believe it. Well, it's a synthetic form, which is antibacterial, that's why it's in the viruses, 100% absorptible, crosses the blood-brain barrier, breaks down into elemental mercury. And then the role of selenium. You know, selenium has the strongest affinity for mercury. Once it's bound to it, it's very, very difficult to separate it and very difficult to get it out of the body. If mercury binds to selenium before it enters the body, it will be less toxic. A lot of selenium in fish. If mercury binds to selenium after it enters the body, it will be more difficult to remove. Are mercury contaminated fish toxic? Well, the good news is selenium is an antioxidant which binds oxygen and protects against the free radical damage from certain chemicals that can cause cancer. Fish are high in selenium. Mercury binds to selenium, which provides protection to the fish and makes the selenium-bound mercury harder for humans to absorb. And a lot of the selenium is in the nervous system of the fish, which we don't generally eat. You know, we eat the meat, the muscle. Let me try this again. I'm getting there. There. Mercury in fish has already reacted with proteins and other protective molecules. The mercury bound selenium is not as toxic as equal amounts of pure equivalent. So it's not as deadly for us as we'd like to say. And I'll show you a chart later on that shows where the mercury in our bodies are coming from. Some from fish, but not as much as we're been told to be fearful of. Mercury forms covalent bonds with silver. More than 99% of the enzymes in the body contain sulfur. That mercury has a strong affinity. Mercury will bind to the sulfur groups and disrupt the function of the enzyme. Many of these sulfur-containing groups have detoxification functions, meaning that once the mercury binds to that sulfur group, that enzyme, it changes the shape. The key no longer fits into the keyhole. So even though you have the enzyme, it's ineffective. It doesn't work because it won't fit back into the key where it's supposed to work. And as it says here, many of these enzyme groups have detoxification functions, so you're losing the effect of the detoxification of that enzyme. Has affinity for methionine, cysteine, and cysteine. When mercury binds to an enzyme, the enzyme no longer functions, as I mentioned. Relative toxicity, you got mercury, cadmium, arsenic, thallium, and lead. Now, years ago, I would have put arsenic on the top of that list. But in fact, mercury is more toxic than arsenic or cadmium or lead. I don't know if any of you have gone through chelation through a physician, but one of the first things they take out of most of my patients and me was lead. That is coming from, I guess, when we were kids, a lot of us had leaded gasoline. My dad had a gas station, so I worked and pumped and cleaned parts and with leaded gas for years when we had grown up working in a station. I also worked in a refinery as a steam fitter for 2 summers. Steam fitters are the guys who put the pipes together, pipe fitters, also known as that. I worked in a refinery, so we had leaded gas, had asbestos, had all kinds of good stuff. And refineries are nasty, but thank God we have them. Tom McGuire, mercury is the most poisonous, non-radioactive, naturally occurring substance on our planet. Now, he's not the only one that says that. That's pretty significant. There is no safe or harmless level of mercury. Just 1 atom of mercury is harmful to the body. Amalgam filling is continually release poisonous mercury vapor. The whole time that filling is in your mouth, your patient's mouth, it's off-gassing mercury. And when it finally gets all the mercury out of it, it falls apart, and if it hadn't already busted the tooth, and then you get a new mercury filling in many offices. Any form of stimulation that heats an amalgam filling will increase the release of mercury vapor. That's called chewing, bruxing, flossing. So if you like to chew gum, the more you chew gum, the more mercury vapor will be coming off. Mercury fillings are the single greatest source of mercury exposure. That is also stated by the World Health Organization. The first exposure to mercury from mercury fillings can occur at the moment of conception. It crosses into the placenta and into the fetus. Mercury passes through the placenta to the fetus and through breast milk to the nursing baby. So nursing mothers, let's just say you're a dentist without taking precautions. Whatever mercury absorbs going into the baby as you breastfeed, or if you have amalgam fillings. Chronic mercury poisoning can directly and indirectly contribute to the increased risk of severity of every known disease and health issue. Now, I don't think Boyd Haley's speaking this meeting, but boy, you ever listen to him on mercury, you'll be a believer. And just some review, some numbers here, just to give you a kind of a sense of quantity. 1 ounce equals 28 grams. 1 gram is 1,000 milligrams. 1 milligram is 1,000 micrograms. And there are 4 trillion mercury atoms in 1 microgram. It's 1 microgram. That's a very, very small amount of mercury, has 4 trillion atoms in it. Here's an electron microscope of a surface of an amalgam filling. And what's to note here is that, mercury amalgam is a conglomerate, it's called, an amalgam because it's not a complete mixture. It's not like taking flour and the egg and completely getting the whole thing beat up. It is partially mixed. And what you're seeing here is globules of mercury that haven't completely dissolved into the amalgam. So as this surface wears, these mercury particles are allowed to evaporate out of the surface. So as this amalgam surface wears down, you can see it's right there. Next is going to be here. That's where the mercury is coming from. Now here's an interesting study. It's been done a long time ago. You can see in 1979, and another one's done in 1985. And we don't know exactly what standards these were done under. We don't know how many mercury fillings were in this patient's mouth. But this is what they did. They just measured the amount of mercury unstimulated, meaning no chewing, no hot fluids. And what they discovered is 1.76 micrograms of mercury were coming off in this study, and that study, and that study, versus people with no amalgam. So you can see quite a difference in the length here. So just remember 1.76. Now here's stimulated. This means they're chewing, maybe drank something hot. I don't know what they did on this, but 13.1. That's almost 13 times higher with chewing than it was without chewing. So this is, again, people without mercury, people with mercury fillings. Okay, estimated stimulated chewing per, wait a minute, let's skip through one here. Yeah, estimated unstimulated release per day with people with mercury fillings, that's 30.4 micrograms a day, significant amount. Estimated stimulated chewing per day, 226. The point being here is the more mercury fillings we have, the more mercury vapor we're absorbing, inhaling. So, and also through our buccal mucosa. I mean, it goes right through the tissues. Remember, it's not ionized. Mercury vapor has no charge, so it can go through cell walls. Here's a graph that's showing what happens with people with a mercury filling who had them chew for 30 minutes. You can see here, you can see the graph going up with the mercury coming off the fillings. And the point of this whole thing by Vinnie Murray is that, this is how long it takes it to come back down. We're talking 30 minutes, and it still isn't back down to base. So after you're chewing, the mercury's not finished coming off, it's still coming off. And high copper amalgams, we mentioned, have increased mercury release. And the data showing that this spill of high copper amalgam filling releases roughly 300 micrograms initially after placement and 782 micrograms of mercury in the first week. Now it goes down to that, but it's a lot of release. Several 100% more mercury than what high copper amalgams release. Now here's an interesting chart, because this is going to show us what is our maximum allowable release according to OSHA and the EPA. OSHA, we both know who they are, we know who the EPA is. With 6 amalgam fillings, we're 2 times over the OSHA's limit for mercury exposure per day. And the EPA, with 6 mercury fillings, we're 400 times over. Now this isn't anything to dispute, because this can be measured, and OSHA and EPA have the standards, occupational standards. If you're in working industry, if you work in a fluorescent light bulb factory, they're going to be in there checking you regularly how much exposure your employees have. So these are the limits, and you cannot exceed these, but you can see with just 6 fillings what happens. Here, opening a mixed amalgam capsule, 200 times OSHA, 3,300 times as much mercury as you're allowed to have. Drilling fillings out, 80 times OSHA, 13,000 times. Joe's got some more information on this later on, but OSHA, EPA don't care what we're doing. They don't care what our health is, I guess. Either that or somebody's turning a blind eye. Facts from other government agencies: WHO, World Health Organization, 1991, a long time ago. Dental amalgam is the greatest source of mercury burden in the non-occupational exposed population. The daily exposure from amalgam, according to WHO, is between 3 and 17 micrograms, with 10 micrograms being the average mercury vapor exposure per day from amalgam. Again, a microgram doesn't sound like much until you realize how many mercury atoms is in that. Health Canada, 1996, a little more recent. Maximal tolerable daily intake of mercury would be reached with 4 average-sized fillings. And that's based on industrial safety levels, or 8 surfaces for a 154-pound adult. I could have about 12 surfaces, I guess. Sources of mercury exposure, again, World Health Organization, amalgam. Then we talked about non-fish foods here. I think I'm supposed to say fish. I think I got off there, Joe. That's fish, but look at the difference between eating fish and having amalgams. Non-fish foods, and of course, we have some in our water. What don't we have in our water? Mercury absorption, again, we talked about metallic mercury, the little chunks that come off of the mercury filling if you're not using the dam. The patient swallows them. Not a lot of absorption from that. Not a good idea for it to happen, but there's not a lot of absorption. Ingested inorganic mercury salts we're talking about, less than 25%. But the inhaled mercury vapor, when you're removing that mercury filling, is killer. It is tremendously high. Joe will show you some information gained, him and Maddie produced, that will blow you away on what's going on with the mercury vapor. And then ingested the methyl mercury, thimerosal, stuff like that. Not, excuse me, thimerosal, but just the methyl mercury, 95 to 100%. Updating exposure examining, okay. This is determined that some 76 million Americans would exceed the mercury dose associated with a reference dose of 0.3 micrograms of mercury per cubic meter. Now that's amazing. 67 million Americans, and that was done, I guess, in 95. So I don't know what the latest would be. That's a lot of people exceeding the government's allowable limits. Concurrent exposure to lead, methyl mercury, and mercury vapor does occur in the U.S. population. A large proportion, 1/3 of the U.S. population, is concurrently exposed to mercury, methyl mercury, and lead on a daily basis. Remember, if you have fluoride in your water, you have increased amounts of lead in your water. Both the Environmental Protection Agency and National Academy of Science state that between 8 and 10% of American women, 8 and 10% of American women have mercury levels that would render any child they give birth to neurological disorders. We're wondering why we have so much autism. Well, it could be a couple reasons for that, but it could be mercury. We don't know if it's a combination of mercury and fluoride and everything else that's going on, but there's a tremendous difference. Autism, I think in 1980, was less than 1 in 500,000 births. Today, it's greater than 1 in 160. That's 160. 1 in 500,000 versus greater than 1 in 160. Something's going on. We believe it, could be part of the thimerosal that they're putting in the vaccines. They claim not. Something's going on that doesn't seem right. Based on the prevalence for overall U.S. population of women of reproductive age and the number of U.S. births each year is estimated that more than 300,000 newborns each year may have increased risk of learning disability associated with use in utero exposure to methyl mercury. AD8, or what was it, AD8? Learning disorder. What's that acronym? There you go. Thanks. I don't know. It's just an interesting thing to think about. We've got a lot of chemicals in our society, a lot more than we did when I was a child. Every day there's more and more chemicals coming out, who we don't know what effect they're going to have on us. We're just seeing the results. Here's the directions for dispersal oil. The use of it contraindicated in expectant mothers, children under 6, interproximal occlusal contact to dissimilar metal restorations, gold crowns, PFM crowns, patients with renal deficiency, patients with known allergy to mercury. Estimated 8% of people are allergic to mercury. For retrograde or endodontic fillings, see those all the time. As a filling, how many people have taken off a gold crown, PFM crown, and there's mercury under it? I mean, it happens all the time. I don't get it, but we were told not to do that in 1979, and I find it every day. I'm getting better with these buttons, aren't I? A little credit. Come on. This is great.
It's meant to show the power of combining metals to create electricity. We use it today to show the power of combining metals in a person's mouth to create a potato clock in your head.
This is one of our members, Steve Coral. He's great.
Here are 2 potatoes, each with a zinc and a copper strip embedded in them. It takes 2 cells of zinc and copper to run this little digital clock. When you hook them all up, the potato clock starts to run. Got it? Here's a variety of dental metals that are embedded in a potato, ready to go. This one is a pure titanium implant. This one is a titanium alloy implant. Here is a lump of amalgam. This one is the remnant of a Maryland bridge, a nickel chromium alloy. Here is the remnant of a crown, porcelain fused to mystery metal. Here is an ingot of high gold content, crown and bridge gold. And here is a bridge of porcelain fused to some kind of yellow crown and bridge gold. Here is one copper and zinc cell, and here is another potato with the variety of dental metals that we just described embedded into it. Let's see what happens when we hook them up. Here is a pure titanium implant, and here is some gold. We get a potato clock. Yes, we are. Here's another gold alloy, and it is lighting up. A mystery gold alloy. And there we go, we get the contact. Here is a titanium alloy implant versus yellow gold, and that lights up the potato clock. Here's some crown and bridge gold. Here's a white gold alloy. And here's some amalgam. And you'll notice that the two electronegative metals do not light up the potato clock. Here is a remnant of a Maryland bridge, a nickel chromium alloy. And that lights up the potato clock. And gold, and the white gold. There we go. What about amalgam? Here is a lump of amalgam. What does that do with a pure gold alloy? It's the potato clock. Your crown and bridge gold, a white gold alloy. What about titanium alloy versus amalgam? No. Two electronegative metals. We dentists pick metals for people's dental restorations on the basis of their mechanical properties and their durability, but we rarely take into account the electrical properties of the metals. This little demonstration shows how by randomly selecting metals for people's dental restorations, it's the equivalent of creating a potato clock in their heads.
That was Steve Carl, one of our long-term members, brilliant guy. And this is what used to happen to me. Ralph Phillips was my dental materials director and professor at Indiana. And just like you guys, after lunch, we fell asleep too. Very soft-spoken guy, very interesting guy, but hard to sit through after lunch. According to Skinner and Phillips, and this is back in 1964, the insertion of mercury restorations directly in contact with a gold crown would be contraindicated. I mean, back in 64 they were talking about, still find it today. Mercury in tooth roots and in jaw bones, fourfold increase the amount of mercury per gram of tissue weight of dentin when a gold crown is placed over a mercury filling, meaning, you know, you sometimes wonder where these amalgam tattoos come from. You know, the theory used to be you'd spun a mercury filling out, and then the power of that 400,000 RPM drill would push that mercury or metal into the tissue. It's called galvanic reaction is what's causing that. And the brain operates on nanoamps, okay, extremely low voltage, or power, I should say. Mercury fillings produce 1,000 times more amperage than the amperage required by the brain. So here we're talking about electrical properties of mercury versus the chemical properties. But even with the electrical properties, you know, this reminds me, I don't know if you're all old enough to remember Johnny Carson's show. You've probably all heard of it, but there was a time when I remember this because I saw replays of it, but Lucille Ball was on the show, and Johnny Carson asked her, you know, like they always have some prep questions, they already know what the answers are going to be, and asked her, well, I understand when you hear radio signals in your head, and she said, yeah, and it was kind of like you're crazy, assuming that was the assumption, you're nuts if you're getting signals in your head, you can hear radios. But the connection would be to the galvanic reactions, what we think is going on there. There's a lot of people who have had that experience. Patients of mine have come in and told me about it. So now we're finding, now that dental implants are so popular, and I'm guilty of this too, I placed 2 yesterday, that, the titanium with the implants, the mercury, the gold, whatever else we got in the mouth, we're creating a lot of amperage that is, in some cases, is a problem for the brain. Now, we don't think a thing about putting a metal hip implant in or a knee implant, but that dental implant's a lot closer to the brain. Chronic long-term exposure and inhalation of mercury vapors causes mercurialism. Findings are extremely variable and include tremors, shakes. I mean, you can go down the list of this. You see this a lot. And this is one of the pages I had in my website I had to take off. It'd be hard to prove all this. I mean, we can't say this occurs, but this is the things that have been associated with. So what about mixed amalgam? The Barnes legal case in 2006. This is really interesting because the Sixth Circuit Court, and that's not important where it was, based on testimony of Kerr, I think they make some dental amalgam, don't they? Mixed amalgam and pure mercury are equally hazardous, therefore a separate MSDS sheet is not necessary for amalgam. You can use the MSDS sheet for mercury and it's just as accurate as it is for amalgam. That's saying a lot from the manufacturer of the product. Mercury vapor inhalation inhibits binding of guanosine triphosphate to tubulin in a rat's brain, similarly to a molecular lesion in Alzheimer's disease brains. Boyd Haley is a member of our group. Unfortunately, I don't think he's lecturing this time, but don't ever miss his lecture when you're here. He's great. Dental silver tooth fillings, a source of mercury exposure, revealed by whole body. I'm going to get ready to show you this stuff on some interesting scans and films. Exposed revealed by whole body image scan and tissue analysis, and whole body imaging of the distribution of mercury released from mercury fillings into monkey tissue. All right? Now, Benny Murray did this back up in Calgary, University of Calgary. And again, it's a little dated, but doesn't change the science. A full body scan of sheep, and what they did is they put a mercury fillings in the sheep's teeth and left them for 29 days. Now, the interesting thing about this is they made a radioactive amalgam. So mercury is not radioactive in nature. You have to make it radioactive. So this stuff couldn't have shown up for any kind of environmental reason. It was placed in the sheep's mouth, left there for 29 days, and then the teeth, coronal portions were cut off. And then what they did is they just did a scan on this animal to find out where the mercury deposited. And it's not hard to see that there's a fair amount of it in the mandibular and maxillary tissue too. The stomach is here. You got 3 of those concentrated in the stomach. And then B is the kidneys, fair amount there, then scattered around. And then D is the liver, which is in here too. So you can see that the liver and the digestive system have a lot of amalgam, or mercury, radioactive mercury in them. Okay, this is another view of the same thing. And then it wasn't believed that research was put out there, and organized dentistry said, well, that's ridiculous. We don't chew like sheep. Yeah, they're mammals, but they chew differently. They're rudiments or something they're called. But they grind their food. So that's nonsense. That's not crazy science. They said, fine, he did it with a monkey. Monkeys are pretty similar to us. Same results. Jaw, kidneys, intestine, and stomach. So even between a sheep and a monkey, still wasn't believed, but there you go. This is very interesting. I hope this plays. Demyelinization of nerve fibers can lead to diseases such as multiple sclerosis, ALS, Alzheimer's, mental illness, and depression. I won't touch anything.
How mercury causes brain neuron degeneration. Mercury has long been known to be a potent neurotoxic substance, whether it is inhaled or consumed in the diet as a food contaminant. Over the past 15 years, medical research laboratories have established that dental amalgam tooth fillings are a major contributor to mercury body burden. In 1997, a team of research scientists demonstrated that mercury vapor inhalation by animals produced a molecular lesion in brain protein metabolism, which was similar to a lesion seen in 80% of Alzheimer's diseased brains. Recently completed experiments by scientists at the University of Calgary's Faculty of Medicine now reveal, with direct visual evidence from brain neuron tissue cultures, how mercury ions actually alter the cell membrane structure of developing neurons. To better understand mercury's effect on the brain, let us first illustrate what brain neurons look like and how they grow. In this animation, we see 3 brain neurons growing in a tissue culture, each with a central cell body and numerous neurite processes. At the end of each neurite is a growth cone where structural proteins are assembled to form the cell membrane. 2 principal proteins involved in growth cone function are actin, which is responsible for the pulsating motion seen here, and tubulin, a major structural component of the neurite membrane. During normal cell growth, tubulin molecules link together end to end to form microtubules, which surround neurofibrils, another structural protein component of the neuronal axon. Shown here is the neurite of a live neuron isolated from snail brain tissue, displaying linear growth due to growth cone activity. It is important to note that growth cones in all animal species, ranging from snails to humans, have identical structural and behavioral characteristics, and use proteins of virtually identical composition. In this experiment, neurons also isolated from snail brain tissue were grown in culture for several days, after which very low concentrations of mercury were added to the culture medium for 20 minutes. Over the next 30 minutes, the neurite membrane underwent rapid degeneration, leaving behind the denuded neurofibrils seen here. In contrast, other heavy metals added at this same concentration, such as aluminum, lead, cadmium, and manganese, did not produce this effect. To understand how mercury causes this degeneration, let us return to our illustration. As mentioned before, tubulin proteins link together during normal cell growth to form the microtubules which support the neurite structure. When mercury ions are introduced into the culture medium, they infiltrate the cell and bind themselves to newly synthesized tubulin molecules. More specifically, the mercury ions attach themselves to the binding site reserved for guanosine triphosphate, or GTP, on the beta subunit of the affected tubulin molecules. Since bound GTP normally provides the energy which allows tubulin molecules to attach to one another, mercury ions bound to these sites prevent tubulin proteins from linking together. Consequently, the neurite's microtubules begin to disassemble into free tubulin molecules, leaving the neurite stripped of its supporting structure. Ultimately, both the developing neurite and its growth cone collapse, and some denuded neurofibrils form aggregates or tangles, as depicted here. Shown here is a neurite growth cone stained specifically for tubulin and actin, before and after mercury exposure. Note that the mercury has caused disintegration of tubulin microtubule structure. These new findings reveal important visual evidence as to how mercury causes neurodegeneration. More importantly, this study provides the first direct evidence that low-level mercury exposure is indeed a precipitating factor that can initiate this neurodegenerative process within the brain.
Isn't that good news? Well, this is an interesting little study, too, just to show you that 9 of our members in 2007 placed a 1 spill, which I think there was 1, 2, and 3 in those capsules, I don't remember. Amalgam in a plexiglass mold with 10 holes in it. I don't know the significance of the 10 holes, but they did. And the amalgams were placed in distilled water at room temperature. After generally mixing, 1 milliliter sample was analyzed. The level of mercury released by 1 square centimeter of dental amalgam from a single spill was between 4 and to 22 micrograms per day. Again, only trying to show you, convince you that this stuff's not stable. The mercury comes off of amalgam and is very, very easily measured. This is a study of Per Nundy. He's a professor at Ohio State University. He's lectured to us several times. Brilliant guy. Transitional heavy metals attach to lipids in the endothelium of the blood vessel, altering lipid signaling mediators. Prostaglandins are released, causing inflammation and tears in the membrane. Plaque forms to repair the damage. Maybe what they're saying is that with high concentrations of mercury in the body, you may be more susceptible to heart attacks and vascular damage. I'm suggesting that that's not what he's saying there, but it seems to make a corollary. Mercury causes cytotoxicity in the vascular epithelium. Methyl mercury causes mitochondrial damage. Why do dentists think mercury is safe? The question rises. Many opinions differ widely in spite of the fact that a number of studies addressing this problem have already been conducted. I mean, a lot of science out there. We don't need more experiments. If you go to the IAOMT website, there is tons of papers out there, not written by us, but written by scientists around the world. One possible reason may be that some studies claiming mercury safety in dentistry show substantial methodological flaws or simply disregard the basic principles of toxicology research on metallic mercury. Okay, genetic susceptibility to mercury. Why aren't we all dead? Well, that's a question that comes up. And alloprotein E is a protein that transports cholesterol in the cerebral spinal fluid. And there are APO4, 2, and 3. But at any rate, what this is suggesting, alloprotein APO4 reduced mercury detoxifying capacity, meaning that if you can be gene type for this, 2, 3, or 4. The type 4 has 2 arginine molecules on it. Alloprotein 3 has an arginine and a cysteine, and alloprotein 2 has 2 cysteines. So if you got 2 sulfur groups, which the cysteines would be in the 2, or 1 sulfur group in the 3, or none in the type 4, then your susceptibility to mercury-related diseases goes up if you are a 4 versus if you are a 2, and this can be shown. And low hair mercury in autistic children. That's something my patients all the time come in and say, look, I had my hair tested and I didn't have any mercury in it. Well, I said, well, that's good, or it could be bad, because if you're not a secretor, if you're not getting rid of mercury, if you're hoarding it like you would if you were an allele 4, then the mercury's staying in your body, and that you don't have any in your hair. If you got a lot in your hair, that may indicate that your body's excreting it. You're getting rid of it. You all have patients. Well, I've used this with my patients with smoking. A person who's smoked for his whole life doesn't die of lung cancer, dies of something totally unrelated. These genetic susceptibilities are probably why. So some people that come in, they've got a mouthful of mercury fillings. It doesn't bother them a bit, it seems like. Other people have 2 or 3, and they've got a definite problem. They'll come in with something changed after these 2 fillings were placed. Mark, this is an old time, go back to that Newsweek, cover, but talking about lead. Back when I was a kid, there was nothing about lead. We had it in our gasoline, and it wasn't a big deal. We had it in our paint. I painted houses for years with lead paint. That's how I got through undergraduate and dental school, was painting houses. What happens when you combine the LD1 of mercury, that's the lethal dose, and lethal dose of lead? It's 100 times more than if you just had the lethal dose of mercury. So mercury and lead are synergistic and have 100 times more toxic effect than just the mercury. And lead is all over. I mean, like I said earlier, every time my patients get chelated, they come in, everything's off the chart, lead's right up there with them. I don't think I've ever had anybody come in with low lead. And some of the responses we get, mercury has a time-dose relationship. The more you have it in your mouth, the longer it's in there, the more it's going to be in your body. It's not safe. We talked about the electrical properties that it has. People respond in 1 of 5 ways. And all of us, maybe I've seen this many times. Nothing changes. Worse, if increased exposure due to pore removal protocol. Well, I'd hate to admit the pore removal protocol, but some people are so susceptible that they'll come in with, say, 20 amalgams, and the physician wants me to remove 1 at a time. And I'm thinking, you've got 4 amalgams down here in the lower quadrant. I numb you 1 time, I can get them all gone, but they're worried about pushing them over the line, so they have to remove them very slowly. But what I'm saying is, even with the best standards, some of these people can get sick after removal. Better health after detoxification by a physician, and that's very important, this thing about detoxification by physicians. We don't do that, we're dentists. These people, once they're detoxified and get better, obviously it was from the mercury. Better health immediately upon removal, electrical property. So that would be going back to the electrical problem. Some better after amalgam removal and more after physician detox, probably a combination of electrical and just the burden of the mercury from the chemical aspect of it. This is what I like to tell. This is on my website. This is what I get my patients to do or encourage them to do. This is stuff we, again, learned from Phil Monica's course. Get them on cilantro, chlorella, alpha-lipoic acid, freeze-dried garlic, anything with sulfur in it. Broccoli, onions, garlic, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, all those vegetables are extremely high in sulfur and good to attach and collect mercury. Omega-3 and 6 fatty acids, low on the 6, high on the 3. Healthy elimination of heavy metals through the bowel. Again, we do not detoxify our patients, but what we want to make sure of is that it comes through the bowel, not the kidney. You do not want it to come through the kidney if you can avoid it. If it comes through the kidney, it'll accumulate in the kidney, and very little comes out in the urine. Additional supplements that we try to get our patients to: probiotics. We want a healthy gut. Phil talked about that this morning. 1,000 to 2,000 IVs of vitamin C a day, and we use a liposomal form of that. Live On Labs makes a great product. We use that and their glutathione, 900 milligrams of glutathione again. Glutathione is very good for transporting mercury out of the body. Both of those are very good antioxidants. Drucker liquid minerals, something else you can do. This stuff changes a little bit. Alkazone to help alkalize the patients. Intestinal metal detox. I think Chris Shade is here. I think he's speaking Saturday. Don't miss his lecture. Really, really bright guy, and he's got a lot of information on this and some great products. This is a chart. It's a little hard to see. I've got about 6 slides of this. It's kind of busy, but what this is going to show you, and again, Randall Moore made this up for us. He's a cinematographer, and you'll hopefully meet him tomorrow night. But what this is showing us, and Kim in here? No. We should have these posters somewhere outside in the by the front desk. I hope we do tomorrow anyway. But I have these in my office, and you can get them through the IAOMT. But what it's doing, it's taken the journey from the amalgam, where it comes from, how it goes in the body. And I mentioned a little bit earlier, our focus changed a little bit years ago when we realized it was hard to get people to understand and accept the health aspects of mercury. But everybody's concerned about the mercury environment. We can't have mercury in our environment. Was it a amount of mercury? A teaspoon of mercury pollutes a 10-acre lake. So mercury in the environment is really a bad actor. So what we did here, and then what people weren't thinking about, is that, we don't want that mercury in the environment. But if it's in your mouth, it's in the environment. Because what's going to happen is you're going to breathe it out. You're going to swallow it. It's going to go into the septic system. And then what they do with the sludge, they take the sludge, they dry it, put it on farm fields, or maybe you get some for your garden. So the whole thing, if they burn you, cremate you at the end, it goes off into the environment, into the air. So once you put it in a person's mouth, it's in the environment. So that's an interesting thing to look at, because we don't want it in the environment. So this is it's a big, long poster, and all these things are on it. And it's a little hard to read there, and it's a little busy. I'm not going to walk you through every one of these steps, but what it's saying again, it's all talking about the environment, and these are just like it's being transported. What do mercury dentists do with they dump half the stuff down the drain. There's no separators. The debris gets flushed right into the septic system. And interesting, estimated 40 to 60% of mercury in streams and rivers come from dental offices. Because we don't have any stock. Now we do. We have mercury separators in our basement, but most dentists do not have that. So if you want to even think about the environmental aspect of mercury, this industry is polluting our streams and rivers. And so it gets down here a little bit further. Let's see. Yeah, it's just, you got to look at this thing. It's cool. It's done very, very well. Here's what this is showing is we're throwing our titurator caps into the trash. Those things are full of mercury vapor, and they're sitting there all day long in that bucket next to you while you're breathing that mercury vapor. Nasty, nasty. And this is just showing it comes into the water filtration system, and they can't take the mercury out of this sludge. There's no way they do that. It just becomes sludge along with, I used to think what bothered me before, But you remember, anybody, we don't have old x-ray films anymore, do we? We process them and all that stuff. Yeah, nobody in here has that. Amazing. We were talking lunch, now that everything, if you came out of school and set up office, you wouldn't think about not having a cone beam. Well, digital dentistry's changed this, but I used to worry about those chemicals going into the drain, full of silver, number one, but otherwise the processing chemicals are nasty too. But here it is. Now we're talking about sludge. Mentioned that. It's going to get spread on the farm fields. And they're loading up the dump trucks, fertilizing the fields with it, and that's off-gassing into the air and also accumulating in our corn along with Roundup. That's another topic. Has anybody used Roundup in here around the house? Let me share something with you. This is the best thing that's ever. Roundup is extremely nasty on your kidneys and the environment. And one of the things about GMO, I'm getting off the subject, GMO foods, the problem is not only the change in the genes in this product, but you can spray Roundup on it and it doesn't kill it. Well, what do you think happens to that Roundup? It gets incorporated into the corn or the wheat, wherever you have to spray it on. So if you want to spray around the house, what I've discovered, my wife found this on the internet, you take 1 gallon of distilled white vinegar, 1/4 cup of Dawn original detergent, it's blue, and 2 cups of Epsom salt. You mix that up in a bucket. I make it 2 gallons at a time. I got a backpack sprayer. You mix it up and mix it up, mix it up. It dissolves pretty easily. Throw it in your sprayer, spray it on weeds. It kills everything just like Roundup does with no environmental problems. So my tip of the day. Another good tip. I don't know why this works, but it does. Have you ever tried this? What is the best way to keep people from gagging? How'd you know that? Anybody else use salt? I'm surprised. I had a patient come in 2 years ago and told me that, and I said, "What?" She said, "Yeah, try it." It worked. I used to do the temporal tap and Tarzan tap, but a little bit. Oh, we have packs of salt like you get at the restaurants. Open it up, dump it on the tongue, boom. How's it work? You can tell me. You don't know either, but it works. Oh, getting back to we're getting back to mercury vapor here. Well, you can see, this is a urinal. So as we get rid of our mercury, it goes in the urinal. I think this says amalgam stinks. Yeah. And here's a coffin. So when you're buried, it's eventually going to go into the ground. And then this is a crematorium. So, whatever goes into your body is going to go into the environment. And that's 28 tons of dental mercury going into the environment. Now, one of the things that Joe and I think hopefully all of our members do, is we use mercury separators in the basement, which takes out between 1/4 and 1/2 pound of mercury a year. That gets recycled, does not go into our wastewater. This is a sign. I think this is down in South Carolina. I think Joe on one of his rivers. But this is excuse me, I pushed that accidentally. My fault. Joe lives up here in Greenville, and I'm living up here somewhere in North Carolina. But you think of South Carolina as a pretty rural state. I mean, there's not a lot of industry. Down here on the coast, there's paper mills and stuff like that, but there's not a lot of heavy industry in South Carolina. But look how many of these rivers are considered advisable. Don't eat the fish out of them in a rural state. That's amazing. So why are we not supposed to eat humans anymore? Because they contain toxic levels of mercury thanks to all the fillings in their teeth. And with that, let's see. This is mercury sludge left on a rubber dam. This might be the vinyl dam, but we'll go through that. We always use vinyl dams, not rubber dams. Mercury goes right through latex. And this is showing Joe taking the gloves off, puts one glove inside another, and then we dump it into a semi-sealed trash can for the day. We got a lid on it. And what we do is you take these gloves off immediately after you remove the mercury in the dam. We wrap the gloves, put it in a baggie, and then we put the baggie in this can. And this is showing Joe with his respirator on. He'll go through that later. When he opens this 5-gallon can, dumps the stuff in there. As you can see, that's the end of the day, dumping the stuff out. Joe had a really busy day. He had 4 gloves in that can. I was saying earlier, dental office wastewater contains a 1.5 pounds of mercury per dentist per year. It only takes half a gram of mercury to contaminate a 10-acre lake. I mentioned that earlier. I think I said more than that, but that's the thermometer's worth of mercury in a 10-acre lake, and you can't eat the fish. This is an example or slide of sludge coming out of the wastewater treatment plant. And, as organic as this may be, I mean, it's probably good fertilizer per se, but it's full of everything, every industrial chemical, everything that went down in our office or anything else in town is combined in that sludge. Should never be used on a farm field. The only industry in the USA that does not require to prevent mercury waste from entering the environment, we are. 60% of mercury reaching treatment facilities is from dental offices. 28 tons of mercury is entering our environment per year because all dental offices do not have separators. 28 tons of mercury in the United States is put in our streams and rivers because we don't have separators. This is an example of a separator. This is the one I have in the basement. There's just been some research by Nestor, one of our past presidents. I think the Mars brand is even better than this. This claims to get 99% of the mercury out of the water. So we hope that's true. This little box here gets shipped off. I do it twice a year because I fill up more than one. So we ship this off twice a year, and they just send me back. And my dental guy puts one on. Yes. Where do you practice? Oh, really? Excellent, excellent. I think, is it King County in Seattle? Is that King County? I think they have to have them too, don't they? Yeah, I mean, it's starting to come on. The ADA's played with it a little bit. I mean, they're just afraid to say mercury's bad. We need to get it out of the rivers, I guess. They're between a rock and a hard place. It's kind of like, my neighborhood, R.J. Reynolds was the big industry. It still is to some extent, but they couldn't come out and say tobacco is bad for you because all those years they said, nah, it's not addicting, it's not this, that. They had all the research that showed it was, but they were saying it wasn't. We think maybe the problem of the opposite side is they've been saying it's not harmful, and maybe it is. Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, why is it toxic when I take it out of your mouth, but it's not when I put it in your mouth? You can't take that jar of mercury and oil and bury it in your backyard. But it's okay in your mouth. I guess it's saliva or something makes it healthy. I don't get what it is. And this is mine sitting again in the basement. And yeah, we'll go here. And I think this is Joe's, kind of a blurry slide, but it shows you his. There's different versions of them. This just schematic of how basically gravity is the way these things work. They're not very expensive. What are they, Joe? $1,500 or something? Something in that neighborhood. I mean, it's not enough to not get one. This is just showing how some of these hook up. This is the Mars. This is what Nestor just got done his research on. This is a very, very good trap. I don't know if it's going to be, or the company will be here or not this weekend, but we got some great exhibitors. We got more exhibitors this time than ever, so be sure and hit the exhibitors. They pay for a lot of this stuff, man, for our lunches and the cocktail party tomorrow night. And, this is some line cleaners you can use. Increases the release of mercury from amalgam, trapped in lines and generates powerless, contains chlorhexidine, gluconate. You got to think about how sludged up these dental lines get. I mean, they're coated. Something I would never want to rent as an ex-dental office to start a business. I mean, the place is coated with it. Joe, I hope, tells a story about how we spent that weekend getting mercury out of these mannequins' mouth in his old office. He was getting ready to move in about a week, so we really tore his place up. This is mostly, Joe, you used to go over this stuff. You move my slide. Complete evacuation system. Huh? Well, I'm done. Let's let Joe go. You can come up here and tear my microphone off.